Greetings and welcome to Office Hours. If you are new here and you want to learn more about what we do, you can head over to officehours.global. Our first hour, we answer your questions on virtual production and media. And our second hour, that's when we spend a little bit more time on a specific subject. And today, we'll be talking about second hours on Mondays. And we want to hear what you would like to see from us and hear from us in 2023. Well, we've got a lot of questions packed up. So, Bill, let's get this party started.
Absolutely, Liberty. Welcome. And let's say Mike Edwards has our first one this morning. And he says, morning, guys. What's the signal flow when rack mounting a Mac Mini in order to get both screen outputs into a Blackmagic video hub, as well as external monitors? What equipment is necessary?
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, Mike, you would take both of your outputs and you would convert them into SDI. And then you would go SDI from the Mac Mini into the video hub. And then you would go out from the video hub into both of your monitors. And the beauty of a video hub is that it will do the routing for you if you set up static relays.
And Alex?
Yeah, and the either the AJA T-Tap, the T-Tap, is that right? T-Tap, or the Blackmagic HDMI to SDI is enough. You want to have something really simple that doesn't add any conversion unless you need it.
Next question.
Paul Wallace in Cedar Creek, Texas says, computer glasses question, how do you determine which setting to use? For example, 1.5, 2.0, and so forth. And what filter, for example, blue light and tint, should he use?
Let's start with Guy.
Yeah, the first model that I got was just the plain Jane ones. I know that they make, Gunner makes a prescription model as well. I believe Chris Fritchie got the models that are custom to his eyes. I tried ordering the 2X. They started to concave, so straight lines were no longer straight. So you got to be really careful and consult an optometrist. Optometrist. Yeah, one of those guys that know what you need for strength. It'd be just like going to the drugstore and getting reading glasses. But if you go too strong, it's going to give you a headache.
And Courtney?
It depends on your eyesight of your two individual eyes. I'll tell you what I have done is my eyes are set at different levels, 20, 30. One focuses 20 feet, the other focuses at 30 feet. And I left them that way when I had my intraocular lenses replaced for cataract surgery. So now I just use drugstore magnifiers because the difference between my two eyes for computers gives me a much deeper range to work with. The problem is if they correct your vision 100%, and then you put on equal magnifiers that are the same magnification in both lenses, it limits the depth of field that you have. You have to be a specific distance from that computer screen for it to be sharp. But if you have monovision, in other words, a different focal length for each eye, you have a much broader range because your brain will shift between the left eye and the right eye as you get closer seamlessly. So, if you're working on your laptop, you may be a different distance from your screen as if you're working at a desktop. So it gives you a much bigger range if you can split the distance between the two. I'd love to see them make magnifying glasses that are slightly different in magnification for each eye, and that gives you a little difference in range, in depth of field.
And Bill, what do you have to add?
I have the same experience Courtney did. When I got eventually needed eye surgery to do that, I got monovision. I set one eye up for the computer distance, and I told them to make it somewhere about 3 feet. And then I asked them for one that was distance vision because I wanted to be able to drive without worrying about my glasses. They did that. And over the course of the next week or two, I had been wearing monovision contacts for a while, but it really is a very useful thing. And yes, I, like Courtney, have to use the over-the-counter cheaters, as we call them sometimes, to do really close-up work or if I'm reading. But other than that, I found this to be a really useful thing. So if you get to the point in your life where you have to get some surgery done, don't be afraid of it. It really is a huge boost to life, makes things easier by far.
Next question.
Paul Buchan in Columbus, Ohio says, I recently uploaded a 4K video to YouTube using the Premiere preset. It was 20 minutes long, but it took over 8 hours to process after upload. I was surprised that the preset didn't offer more of an advantage. Am I missing something?
Guy?
Yeah, I'm curious as to what kind of computer and if you're on a Mac or PC or if it's strong enough. If I look at the settings for the YouTube 2160p 4K Ultra HD export setting, one of the things that I always do first off the gate, if it's 20 minutes long, is you'll notice that there's a little sliders here on the bottom, you can actually trim. And so if it's a 20-minute piece, I'll only encode 1 minute first to get an idea as to the range and the quality. I will not do the whole thing unless it's footage that I already know that it's part of a workflow. But if I'm just doing it out the gate, I wouldn't spend 8 hours waiting to see a result. So that's one thing to keep in mind is down at the bottom. I don't know if you guys can see that. Yeah, you guys should be able to see that. Down at the bottom, there's that trim. The other thing is that it's a VBR one pass. You want to play with some of these. 2-pass would obviously make it a lot, it would take a lot longer. But there is some other settings in here like constant bit rate where you can flip it. And then like on mine, I have the hardware encoding for the NVIDIA codec. So if you have a graphics card in there, you might want to check to see if it's flipped on, if you've got your hardware encoding. Otherwise, it is just relying on the CPU and you're not taking advantage. So again, I don't know what computer you have. If you're on a Mac or PC, maybe you could put that in the chat. And also I would look at using compressor if you are on the Mac, because there might be, especially if you have an M1, there might be some silicon advantages.
And Mitchell?
Guy, is that media encoder you're showing us on the screen?
That is Adobe Media Encoder.
Okay. What happens sometimes is within Premiere, you can set some settings, and then it hands it off to media encoder. And I find that round trip sometimes slows things down. Sometimes it's better to output in a mezzanine format and then go back into media encoder or compressor and do your encoding for YouTube. Sometimes it's faster by a significant amount.
And Bill.
I may be reading this wrong, but it looked to me like they had uploaded the video, and what was causing the tremendous delay was what YouTube was doing on their end to do their transcoding so that it could be on the site. 8 hours does seem unreasonable, and I would look at what was the frame cadence that you sent to it. Did you send them some sort of not H.264, but some kind of odd encoding that had a lot of predictive frames or iframes? And maybe on that 20-minute video, it had to do tons and tons of creation. Also, remember, when you're putting it up on a public service like that, you're in a queue, and it may have been there may have been something happening in terms of maintenance on the end up on YouTube. There also might have been something in terms of just a huge flood of people uploading things, maybe at the end of a week or something like that, that can delay the queues getting started. So this one seems to me that it's not necessarily something happening on your end, but something happening on YouTube's end.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I found that if I'm uploading something to YouTube and I don't want it necessarily available in multiple resolutions, I choose an encoder that is a YouTube profile. So check in Premiere or whatever you're using to render that final output that you're going to upload to YouTube, and set it to a YouTube profile or a compressor if they have a YouTube compatible profile. That way YouTube may not have to recompress it. It will, it'll generate multiple resolutions anyway. But the primary resolution at least won't have to be re-rendered if it's already in a flavor that YouTube can just process without re-encoding.
And wrapping it up, Alex?
I think nowadays YouTube re-encodes almost all the time. So I think that it used to be something that we could, especially if you uploaded something that was hinted that had the information at the header, it would be almost immediate. But it is, I believe that they now re-encode. I'll reach out and find out, but I think that they re-encode almost all the time. And a lot of it has to do with demand. So if you hit at a time when there's a lot, as Bill said, if you hit at a time when there's a lot of things happening, there's a certain number of servers and you get pushed off the queue. So sometimes it's just waiting to be processed.
Next question.
Andy Kofendorfer in Viera, Florida says, aside from resolution, are there any functional differences between the ATEM Constellation 4K and HD versions? Same number of super sources. Thanks.
Go ahead, Alex.
I was looking at it. I don't think that there is. It's the same number of inputs, same number of outputs. It has the same amount of processing. It just seems that it's HD. It's not 4K. I don't think there is a Constellation 4K. I think there's 8K and HD. So I don't think there's anything in between that anymore. Which I think is a little bit of a bummer, but anyway, but I think that they've decided you either are going to go up to the $10,000 version and have 8K and below, or you're going to go for the HD and there's a lot less processing. And that's why it's a lot less expensive. But I don't think that there's any functional difference between the two.
Next question.
Guy Cochran, Seattle, Washington. Any recommendations for a high-capacity portable battery bank with solar charging option? Prefer a model strong enough to run a refrigerator for a day.
Go ahead, John.
Hit up Keenan in Discord, because him and Jack have an overlanding community, and this is what they do. They do batteries and solar. And last time we went camping, he had a fridge that was powered on this unit for 3 days or 4 days or something. So they know everything about this subject.
Next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York, back again. Morning, guys. Does the ATEM SDI or 2ME require a signal to be sent back to the switcher from an URSA in order to shade it?
Jason?
Mike, I would say that there's no such thing as bidirectional SDI, so all SDI switchers are going to require a connection back in order to do the shading.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. So you're sending the signal. You have one signal coming from the camera to the switcher, and one signal going from the switcher to the camera. Note that you don't have to have a cable going to each camera from the switcher. You have one output, and basically it sends all the information for all the cameras across that output. So you basically can send one out and then run it through a splitter and split it to all the cameras, and they can all receive the same feed once they get there. It saves you a lot of cable.
And Jason?
I'll say that differently. You could plug output 4 or output 2 into camera 3, because for Blackmagic, the outputs are completely uniform.
Next question.
Dan Shaw in Columbus, Ohio is up next. He says, sometimes I have the need to record a consented phone call during an interview. Any hardware solutions for how to do this with an iPhone 14, MixPre, and adapters? I'd rather not use an iOS app that the interviewee needs to download.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, the mixer that I'm using, the Rodecaster Pro 2, has a Bluetooth interface built into it that you can bring an iPhone in over its Bluetooth connection and add it to the mix. It also has built-in recording, so you just hit one button to record the output. It'll record both sides of the interview, including your Bluetooth connection over the iPhone, and it can even generate mix minus going back to the person coming in over the phone. So that's one solution. The other solution is to check out JK Audio. Oops, sorry, they're your friend when you have to do phone interfaces. They have a variety of phone interfaces, many of them that have connectivity to Bluetooth, and then you can take that output from the JK Audio interface. It usually comes in over XLR connector or a high impedance RCA connector into your mixer or recorder, and then record it that way. That's another possible.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Good suggestions there, Courtney. Another option would be to go over to Angry Audio and check out their Bluetooth device that will pair up with your iPhone and allow that audio now to be output in an XLR fashion, the normal way that you do that. And if you want to kick your game up a little bit further, they have another application in there. I think it's called Call It. And what that basically is if you're using an iPhone on a network, there's a thing called high-def audio, and you can increase the quality of the iPhone call substantially, particularly if the end user or the origination of the call has a decent mic plugged into their iPhone, and that will come through just like FM radio. It'll sound great. So 2 solutions, one place. Go to Angry Audio.
And John.
You can also use an Avio Bluetooth Dante adapter. And then take the audio and route it any way you want, mix it to anything you want, and then you can use that in the future for anything else that you would need that would require higher quality audio than just a phone call.
Next question.
Jan Bernat in Warsaw, Poland. I hope I'm getting that right. How do you give control of a presentation to a distant place? Perfectly on the local network. For example, the person is on stage to have control over the presentation that is in the broadcast truck.
Jason?
As long as I've been doing this, there's been exactly one solution. Check out pickleremote.com. It's every conceivable way of doing this. I've got one packed away in a Pelican, but Alex probably has his right there.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so I mean, we've done this in the past. Now, a lot of times people will want to bring that computer that's going to do the slides into the room because they're a little superstitious about this. But the way we've done it, when you're talking about a truck, because you're not talking about online, so I'm not talking about an internet solution for this, but at a venue, What we've done is used the DSAN Perfect Q, and then we've converted the USB connection over a LAN. So and then that gets then reconverted back. So it's either fiber directly to something. So it's USB to fiber, and we're using the IHSE converters for that. But the Geffen makes some as well. So that's kind of the IHSE extenders with the DSAN Perfect Q is the industrial grade version of what you're trying to do. So if you're talking about broadcast trucks, I'm assuming that might be what you're hinting towards.
Next question.
Tony Mobley here on the panel from Noonan, Georgia says, panelists, I'm using the Shoot Pro app this morning instead of my normal Filmic Pro. How do I look? I think great.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Tony, you look marvelous. It looked fine. I don't think that there seems to be any major difference from what you normally send through. So I think you have a consistency there, whether you're using Filmic or Shoot.
Go ahead, Tony.
So this was being brave this morning using Shoot because it's for me it's very different, and the color and everything is very different, and I don't know whether that's good or bad, and that's why I asked the question. So.
When you say
thanks.
different, just the color, is that what you're saying? That you just think the color is different, or what in your setup, was there anything different that you had to do?
I think with Filmic and my lighting, I think that there was a tendency for me to be a little blown out. I don't think that I'm as blown out today as I normally am.
Okay. And interestingly enough, I'm on Filmic today on an iPhone, and I called you, Tony, to say, like, how do I set this up? So this is actually a good comparison with that you're using Shoot, and I'm on Filmic today. Go ahead, John.
The only thing I would say is I think you're a little purple, at least from what I'm looking at in my monitor. But other than that, you look great. Definitely not overexposed. Even the white on the back wall is not blown out, which is great.
Go ahead, Bill.
The one thing I am noticing today, Tony, and I'm not sure it's because you have your camera at a different height, but I'm getting more reflection off of lights in your glasses than I've been used to when I see your picture on my screen. So that could be a factor of the camera height in front of you picking up your picture. It also could be that your temples are just riding a little bit low or need to be higher over your ears to just angle that down a little bit. But I'm seeing reflections off those lights more than I had normally. But your picture looks great. I think you look fine.
And Mitchell?
Tony, I don't want to turn it into a ruthless review. I think it looks fine. Maybe your background is a little brighter than you want it to be. Maybe you need to pop a little bit off that background. So I don't know if that's something you can monkey with in Shoot, but I think overall it looks great. And the thing that Bill mentioned, you're right. It's got a little bit of light, and I get that if I go back like that.
Yeah, well, considering that his background is the same as before, just the overall picture quality looks good, Tony. And then JJ McKenna in the comments says, perfectly framed. I hope I said that correctly, JJ. And Mickey says, you need to add some green to your tint. So that will probably help some of that, the color aspect there. All right, next question.
Moving on, it's Douglas Carmichael up next. Does anyone use Paperspace, and he's got a link there, as a cloud production platform?
Oh, let's take a look at Paperspace there. Doesn't look like anyone has used it yet, but that's something that we can look into and explore, and then possibly come back to give you some more insights, especially since we have so many people working in the cloud. So we'll come back to that for you, Douglas. Next question.
Andy Kokendorfer, Vieira, Florida. For your information, very happy with the new Yamaha AGO3 Mark II for Zoom. Onboard DSP EQ is customizable with zero delay, and the Mix Minus drives my JBL monitors nicely. Small desk footprint, and he notes, finally, not bad for $180 US.
Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, I hit the wrong button. Yes, I think I'd love to know what the noise floor is on it, if you're able to measure that, just because compared to other things, because it's Yamahas, the small Yamahas, that's what we've had trouble with in the past, are their preamps. And if they've corrected that, it could be a great value.
Next question.
Tony Mobley, Noonan, Georgia, right back. Yesterday, my audio hijack disappeared from my Mac Mini during House of Worship services. I did SOS during office hours. JJ and Joshua saved the day. Thank you. How do I take over the computer House of Worship participants like JJ did?
Oh, Tony, you want to give us some background on what happened yesterday? Go ahead, Tony. I think you're on mute.
So I was doing my normal setup as I do for our services. And normally we come in an hour ahead of time and make sure that everything is working properly. And audio hijack was not on my Mac Mini, and it was the version 3 was there. And since I did the Mac update, version 3 does not work. And so I had no sound, no audio at all. And so I did a SOS in the Mukana chat to office hours, and JJ and Josh Kaufman came in immediately, and JJ took over the computer and reinstalled version 4, and it was great. And it happened almost instantaneously. And I just, at that point, I realized that it was important for me to figure out how I would be able to take control of the participants in the House of Worship's computers, because there are a lot of different things that happen during the course of the weekly services that I would benefit from being able to log into their computers and help them. And so I wanted to find out if there was a suggestion on, I know I have to get permission from them once whatever software is in place, but if the panel has some suggestions as to what I should use. Most of them are using Windows machines.
Okay. Go ahead, Alex.
I believe that you can actually share that through Zoom. I think that you can ask for a control of someone's computer just through Zoom. So if you're in the Zoom session, you can request that control and take over from there.
Go ahead, John.
One thing that will be limited in Zoom is you won't have access to any system level things. You would need something deeper like a team viewer or another screen sharing utility that would allow you to access that. Zoom has some restrictions, which most likely you won't have to get into, but it is something to note. If you notice that all of a sudden the screen goes black, you're going too far than the Zoom kernel will allow.
And it looks like, so Richard Lavery says AnyDesk and Parsec would be helpful. Like you can use that. And then, JJ says that they just use Zoom remote support. And it's a good, thank you for that question, Tony, because it is knowing that you are probably working with some folks that are not necessarily tech savvy. And if you are on a time crunch, being able to just to go in and navigate your way through is very helpful. Next question.
Greg Gibson in Washington, D.C. says, I need a transcript translated to Latin American Spanish. The document has already been transcripted in English by a human. What's your recommendation for a Spanish translation?
Go ahead, Alex.
We've mostly, for Spanish specifically, mostly used production transcripts. They do transcripts, but they also have Spanish translators that will make that conversion for us. And that's been the one we've used for Spanish specifically. There's a lot of them that are available in DC specifically. Translators are pretty popular because there's a lot of people there. So there's quite a few on M Street.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you could, for cheap and easy, you could try just running it through Google Translate. They have translate.google.com. You can upload a document there in Word format, docx format, and it will translate it, and you can choose your language. Spanish, under Spanish, it only has one selection, so I'm not sure whether it's going to give you the correct, colloquialisms for the Spanish that you need for, European Spanish as opposed to the Mexican style or the South American style. So I would run it through that and have someone who is a local speaker of the dialect that you need read it and see if they think it's accurate.
Yeah, I was going to add on to that there, Courtney, just being mindful of that. And especially if, depending on who the client is that you're working with, because then you just want to make sure that you do have those idioms spoken correctly in that other language. Mitchell?
What Courtney's referring to, generally the particular dialect is Castilian Spanish is the accepted standard.
Next question.
Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia says, what's your simple approach to bringing in one remote Zoom attendee into your local ATEM to do a live super source back into a Zoom meeting so people can see and hear the speaker and can hear the group? And assume I have a spare M1 Mac available.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I guess the question is are you taking them from one meeting and putting them into another, or are you taking them from the same meeting and then putting them back in? I would generally avoid trying to take them from the same meeting and putting them back in. I'd want to bring them in from a breakout room if it was left to me to make that happen. The simplest way to do it that we've done it is that we would use a Mac Mini with, some kind of, you can just use HDMI and convert it to SDI or HDMI straight into the ATEM. We now use Zoom ISO for those things because it allows us to have a clean interface. I don't want to see any of the errata that might occur with the vanilla version anymore. So we use Zoom ISO for that. And then that's going to give us a nice clean output that we have a lot of control over the audio and the video and everything else. And so that's how we tend to approach it to get it into an ATEM specifically.
Next question.
Next question, Paul Wallace, Cedar Creek, Texas says, is there an app that uses Apple's AirTags to reconstruct the travel history of your devices? And he wonders, is there a history file?
Go ahead, Jason.
Without getting into the idiosyncrasies of it, I would say no. In lost mode, you've got a little bit more history that will get surfaced. But no, if this app were to exist, I think Apple would be in big trouble.
Alex?
Yeah, specifically from a security perspective, Apple doesn't want to give you that information, so they're not going to provide that. There are plenty of other ones that will do that, and your phone oftentimes, if Google will tell you where you've been for the last 10 years, if you want to, if you leave it on. So there are other tracking devices that will give you that information, but the specific Apple's trying to make sure that you know where it is and you can find things, but they don't want to open a can of worms of looking at your total behavior and patterns.
And Bill.
All of that. The workout apps tend to be the place that you can find where you've been, because a walking app will often give you the path you've traveled. So if you're just looking for where you've been, I suppose you could set up a workout and leave that running, but I don't think there's anything in the actual AirTag system that does that.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, many smart home kitchen appliance makers like GE and Miele have web-enabled APIs. Aside from cool tech demos, what use cases could you see for connecting appliances within or outside the home?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Douglas, welcome to the world of the Internet of Things, appliances, other devices. I have a air cleaner in my bedroom that is very verbose and sometimes a little too chummy. Making suggestions like I should get more time outside, open the windows, close the windows, hang out with me, you're in good hands, things like that. So be prepared for them to get very personal.
Courtney?
It's very, very useful for HVAC stuff. So any heating and air conditioning that has a web interface, you can control the temperature. You can pre-cool your room down. If you're out, turn on the air conditioner an hour before you get home, and set the temperature lower or set the temperature higher when you leave for the office and so on. You can control it over your phone remotely. Or you can, turn on a heater downstairs while you're upstairs so that it'll be warm by the time you get downstairs. So it's very handy for heating and air conditioning, I find. Refrigerator, not so much.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, you say that, Courtney, but I've got a refrigerator now that if accidentally the door does not fully close in a certain amount of time, the alarm goes off on it to let me know my food is spoiling. It'd be super simple for the new manufacturers to attach that to an alert from my phone. And as you're a block away driving away to work, it says, hey, idiot, you left your refrigerator open and all your food's going to go bad. And that would be a really useful device for that Internet of Things kind of construct.
And Nigel.
I would say today almost none is the answer to that question. I mean, there are a couple of things that I think you would talk about. You could talk about, as Courtney has done, that there may be a way, if you had a smart enough system, it could regulate the various different devices from air handling to heating to cooling to fans to really keep your house at the right temperature without spending too much money. But the reality is most of that stuff doesn't work together again. I would tell you the most important one is if you have devices that are water-based and you are subject to flooding, being able to know when you're away from your home that the leak has started could be a great feature.
And Mitchell?
I thought I'd give you a tip here. The one I use the most of the IoT devices is my Nest thermostat. It's very well made. It looks like something that Apple would make. And it also loves to talk to Google. I won't tell. I just almost gave a command. But I find I get a lot of good use out of that because you can adjust it online. You can do it by talking to it. You can go over and just twist the dial and do things with it. And it remembers. It has a memory in it, and it sort of replicates that sequence of events. So, for example, when I'm here on office hours, it tends to boost the AC up a little bit so that my room is a little cooler because I have all these lights.
And just pulling in some comments here, Chad Lafarge says, connecting all the otherwise unused clocks, notifying of temp conditions remotely. And JJ McKenna says, advertising in the home. Hopefully we don't get there too soon. Next question.
Next question, please. No. Kenny Hampton, Greenville, Illinois, noticing a bit of audio video sync issues with Liberty today. Is that a symptom of Filmic Pro? And if so, how do you correct it?
I highly do believe that is a symptom of Filmic Pro. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so Filmic Pro is going to take a little time to get there. You're doing it over. Are you doing it over Wi-Fi, or are you doing it with a wired connection?
I'm not. Yeah, I'm on a wired connection going directly into the ATEM. So.
Right. So you've got two different places there that you could get some delay. So some from Filmic Pro, some from the ATEM itself. So when anytime you separate audio, you're going to end up with the potential for that to happen. And so somewhere in the audio chain, you need to put a delay unit. So and the audio, because the problem is the audio is you're on USB there, right? So that's USB into the.
Yes.
So the issue there is that the USB is very fast. It's going to get there without any delay. And so in software. And that could be I think Audio Hijack has it there. Yeah, so Audio Hijack could you could add a delay there if you say a couple words. Liberty,
and I wanted to talk too so that they could see that how it's working.
Yeah, there's a lot of delay there. So you probably need to get turn it up. I probably start at 300 or 400 milliseconds to see if that was enough to delay that. That's what it looks like there to me, but it could be a little less. The best thing to do is try to get close, and then we use lots of P words. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper. We had a don't use the clap. The clap is worthless. We do the clap. So at events, we do the clap. So we clap on the stage. We do that for the rest of the crew because they blame us for bad sync if we don't do the clap. Clap is worthless. It's not accurate more than 60 milliseconds plus or minus. And so the P word, you can only make your lips do a certain thing with P's, and so people say it's far more accurate than any clap. So the clap is kind of a legacy thing that people do on stage, but we still do it again. But it's all theater. We don't even bother to look at it.
Yeah, during sound check, that's what came up was that my audio was actually ahead of my video and needing to pull those together, but only so much time, and I didn't have Audio Hijack on this machine. It's
usually easier to fix audio. What's really hard is when you'll see us freak out. If video gets ahead of audio, something is very wrong, and it's very hard to fix. So you worry a lot about video being in front of audio. Audio in front of video is pretty common, and usually there's lots of tools like Audio Hijack in the software that can do it.
Awesome. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And Chris says, looking at finishing my portable setup and finally come on regularly, but I'm trying to find a portable backdrop that doesn't require a ton of space or time to set up. Suggestions are appreciated.
Go ahead, Jason.
I was scrolling madly through my orders. The one that Alex suggested with the magnetic link on a C-stand has been absolutely perfect. So hopefully Alex can pick up the slack on that one.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it used to be a Lastolite, and it's now Manfrotto. So Manfrotto bought Lastolite along with everything else, or I guess the whoever owns Manfrotto, and the Vitec group, I think. And so it is now a Manfrotto screen. This is a 6x7 found that the 5x6 is easier to manage, but it's just a little too small. So this is the 6x7 Manfrotto Lycra screen. It's black on one side and gray on the other. I like the black on one side, gray on the other, as opposed to the white on one side, because the white, it feels like you can see through it a little bit easier. So, and it has there's this little Y that you can put onto a light stand. Just anything with a baby pin, and basically it has 2 magnets in it, and you can just snap this to it. So you just pop it open, snap it. When you want to put it away, you fold it like a burrito, as we all learned from Bill. So not a burrito, a taco.
Taco.
So we call it the taco. Like, I need the taco, and so we just at the office, it's just called the taco.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Backend says sync issues with me using Shoot. Do I need preset audio for both Filmic and a different one perhaps for Shoot?
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, the processing is going to be different between both apps, and the latency will change. So you definitely want to have a latency profile for each different video application that you're using. And if eventually you move into a different type of camera altogether, another setting for you to deal with.
And Tony?
Yeah, I know that with Filmic Pro is negative 170 milliseconds, and it works great because Mickey tweaked it. And so I hadn't even thought about it in terms of Shoot. So that is something that I have to address.
You were just so excited to use to use Shoot, so we understand. Next question.
John Borntreger says, today I learned about the Alumitone and Harpage instruments. That's HARPEJJI instruments. What other instruments has anyone come across that are cool or unique?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
A didgeridoo from Australia. Very cool instrument.
What does it do?
I think it is here. It goes.
Okay.
That Australian sound. I know I did a horrible job of it. As close as I
Courtney?
could get.
Well, if you want to see some real imaginative instruments, go find a copy of the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, which was, they have this basement scene with all these wacky instruments, all invented by Theodore Geisel, who you may know as Dr. Seuss. It was the only live-action movie he ever wrote or directed, and it is full of really crazy instruments and sounds.
Go ahead, Alex.
I mostly stick with instruments that are over 1,000 years old. I don't want to be in any kind of fad. Like I want to know that they lasted the test of time. So a didgeridoo is definitely one of them. I own a didge that I have I just can't quite get to it here. It's very pretty. I've had it for a long time. And then I also like imbiras, which are one of the many thumb pianos. The Imbira is specifically from Zimbabwe, which I love to listen to it, and I've got quite a few of them. My daughter actually plays it better than I do. And then I did start learning the bagpipes, although at the time I was in an apartment building, and my neighbors asked me to stop. so
Weren't too impressed with
until
that.
you're good. It's an acquired taste when you're really good at bagpipes, and when you're bad at it, nobody likes it.
Jason?
Years ago, I bought an artificial djembe, meaning a djembe with a drum head that does not change all the time. And for those who have ever had to restring a djembe, it is absolutely terrible. As far as an interesting instrument, the water phone, if you look this up on YouTube, this is the horror instrument, and it makes the spookiest, like most bizarre sound you'll ever hear. But the moment you see it played, you'll know exactly that you've heard it a lot. And
Mitchell.
I know I'm going to do a horrible job of pronouncing it. It's called a guiche. Is that it? The thing goes. It's a percussion instrument. Guiche.
Okay. We've got some new instruments for our band to try out when they get put together. Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. How do you find the right delay time to line up video and audio without a dedicated hardware device like the Hitomi Matchbox?
Testing. Apart from testing, let's hear from the expert, Courtney.
Well, you can use a clap or a timecode slate, and you record something with your audio and video, and this is where the clap can be used. Judging it by eye, real time, is difficult, as Alex has stated. It's easier to sync up the P's, which our brains are used to seeing in a mouth. But with a pair of sticks, a clap that makes a noise, you can save that out, bring it into your editorial workstation, line it up and look for the peak of the sound on the waveform and where the sticks close or the hands come together. And you can judge. It will tell you exactly how many milliseconds that is out of sync and whether it's ahead or behind. And then you can punch that into your delay, either on video or audio, to bring them back into sync on your live capture devices.
And Alex?
Yeah, and one of the things about it is the sticks work way better. The hands are just, they're too soft. They move around too much and people don't do them. If you do it, you have to do it like this. So your hands are perfectly straight up and you go like this and you pull them away as fast as you can. So there's only a moment where they're together. So if you're going to use hands, you can, but we use sticks, and sticks are, buy them on Amazon for $13. It doesn't matter which ones that you have. It's a nice, very precise thing to close. The other thing is to test your entire system, including your encoder. What you want to do is collect the HLS segments if you're doing a stream, on the other side. So you collect them on the receiving side, which a variety of different apps can do. And you just need one segment that has that piece there, and that can help you figure those things out. Get it close by eye, and then that's how you get it precise.
Next question.
Next one comes from Jack Cannon in Phoenix, Arizona. Got an Elgato key light yesterday. Came in this morning and my Mac is not seeing it now. Any suggestions for troubleshooting?
Nigel?
Yeah, I always find I'd start with the iOS app on my phone and make it work on that first. And then that will allow you to upgrade the firmware if that needs an upgrading. And then I do it on the Mac. And then you can go all the way and get it all the way into Companion. The thing you have to watch out, though, is if, it's DHCPing the address, it will change the address quite often for Companion. But I always start with the iOS app and work it from there.
Go ahead, Jason.
Another big gotcha on the Elgato key light is that it does not play nice at all with 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So constrain your Wi-Fi. Just turn off 5 gigahertz, pair it, do your firmware upgrade. And then once you've nailed down the IP address, you've got a much better shot at a predictable, Mac-based approach.
Go ahead, John.
If it's not working on iOS or the Mac, you may have an issue with multicast DNS. You want to make sure that is enabled within your router. That's the protocol it's going to use to discover the devices automatically and allow you to manage them. So just keep an eye out for that if you're having issues on both.
And Courtney.
Yeah, Jason and John covered what I was going to say. Yeah, because most devices, most Internet of Things devices that have Wi-Fi connection are using 2.4 gigahertz only. They don't receive 5 gigahertz. So make sure either multicast is turned on or you turn off your 5 gigahertz. That way it'll force everything to 2.4 and you should be able to see it then.
And Jason.
Oh, yeah. I've got one more gotcha that I've seen before in the field. If you're using an Eero and you're using Draft WPA 3, if you turn that on in the beta settings, it's going to mess with everything. Shut it off.
Thanks. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. And he says, since the InstaLink now supports global key binding for presets, would the Stream Deck multi-action keys allow you to move the preset, then switch scenes in a software switcher, or would the movement delay be the issue?
Go ahead, Alex.
It must be brand new that this is available, so I don't know the exact answer, but I'm very excited to see that the Link is starting to get some more control that is not just through the software. So hopefully we'll have to take a look at it and play with it, but that looks like a great option. I'm not sure if that would work, what you're asking would work specifically, because we haven't tested it yet, but I think that we're going to see API and lots of other extendabilities coming to the InstaLink, Insta360 Link over the time, because they have that for every other camera that they make. So it seems like this one is just on its way through the system.
Next question.
Paul Valos, Cedar Creek, Texas again. Blue checks are maybe coming out on Twitter today. What are the pros and cons of promoting your brand?
Nigel?
So I got an offer yesterday for $5 rather than $8. I could sign up to be a blue check. So I thought, well, I'll try that for a month or two and see how that goes. So I signed up. I have to tell you, I don't have my blue check yet, which is very disturbing. So I'm hopefully it'll be here by the end of the day. What was actually interesting to me is there's the ability now to upload video and edit stuff, and there seem to be a lot more services. And my guess is that in time you'll pay that $5 or $8 if you want to content moderate, if you want to manage, if you want to monetize yourself, and if you don't, you will just be with the unwashed masses.
Alex?
I think in the short term, a lot of people are going to pay. They're either going to leave or they're going to pay $8 a month. It is a kind of an obvious thing you have to do. Musk over the weekend basically said that you'll scroll for a long time before you see anybody in the feed that isn't a blue check. Now, what's confusing right now is there was a service called Twitter Blue, which is $4.99. There is a service called Twitter Blue that's coming with the check mark that is $7.99 or $8. The new service with the check mark doesn't come out until after the election. So that's going to be potentially as early as Wednesday that's going to come out. But I think that I think that most people are in the short term are going to just go ahead and pay it because no one will hear you anymore if you don't. Like if you go to Twitter to listen and watch things and look at lists and all those other things, then you won't pay it because you're a recipient of things. If you want someone to actually hear you saying something, which is part of the Twitter experience, you will pay for the check mark because otherwise no one will hear you. It's very similar to what Facebook basically does, which is that no one really hears you until you start paying them for advertising. So I think that that's what's coming. And I think that what it does is it means that Twitter probably won't fold overnight, but it creates a high potential for people. There's a lot of stray electrons, there right now, which is that they'll want to find another home pretty quick if something else starts to look viable.
Mitchell?
For $44 billion, you can put anything you want on your Twitter account.
And as Alex said, social media has become now, it's a pay to play, if you just sum it up in that regard. So that if you need to get your content out and your information out to the audience, that blue check may be a good investment. Otherwise, yes, people will be finding other ways to navigate around that. And there might be some innovation that comes from that as well. Nigel?
So I think if I understood what Alex just said, I actually didn't sign up for what I thought I was signing up. I signed up for Twitter Blue, which is a bunch of services that don't go all the way as far as the check mark. And I guess I missed that connection. So that's a learning that I don't know whether they're both going to survive or they're going to merge or what.
The check is the verification. No, well, it is the services. So you're saying, Nigel, that what you signed up was for the services?
And I signed up for Twitter Blue, which gets me the services which I thought were coming with verification, but they're obviously two different things, and I missed that.
Alex?
It's very unclear. The only reason I know is because I almost did it. I was like, well, what's the $4.99 version? And I was trying to figure out what that was. So it is. It's a confusing setup right now. So yeah, there's nothing. You're not. It took me half an hour to figure it out over the weekend because I was like, people saying, "Oh, I'm signing up and it's not very expensive," and I was like, "There's something wrong there," and they decided, I think astutely, not to do it before the election. So they're just going to wait until after the election to make the change. But yeah, you signed up for a lot of extra services which already existed. That Twitter Blue was already there. You're now waiting for the next version of it, which will probably be an upgrade, or next month you'll get it, or you can probably just move up to that or whatever.
And the check mark does come with that, Nigel. I'll post a link to the CNN article there. Bill?
I've been able to mostly ignore Twitter for most of my life, and I'm very glad of it this week, because one of the things I read this morning that passed was that Mr. Musk had dumped about 50% of his roster of people who were working on the site. And this morning there was a passed link about the fact that he's trying to hire back a lot of them because he realized he cut so deep that they're having trouble getting things done. I think this is going to take a good little bit of time to shake out. This feels a little bit to me like one of those ready, fire, aim circumstances where they wanted to make quick changes that were large changes. And sometimes that's not the best way to run services. A little more thoughtful approach sometimes, I think, makes better decisions in the long run, but we'll see what happens.
And Jason.
And if I'm not mistaken, along those lines, Rashad, didn't you mention that 100% of the accessibility staff were just gone? Like,
Harshid?
Absolutely. The whole accessibility department has been purged. So we'll see where they go with it. I heard it as a rumor through another Discord. And then Brianna Wu was on Twit yesterday, and she stated the same fact. So we'll see where it goes.
And Alex.
And Jack Dorsey was right that they grew incredibly fast. I guess it didn't really sink into me how little Twitter made. like it's like until I was thinking in so in fairness, I think that they're going to cut back and then they're going to add things back in as needed. And this is just the time you do something is oftentimes they probably went a little too deep. But they need to do some surgery. They were incredibly bloated for the amount of money that they're making $5 billion on 7,000 employees. That's not a good ratio. so that's a really bad ratio. And it was also a really bad purchase price. Like he should have paid about half of what he actually paid for it. So it was a selection of that. And I think that we can blame Elon Musk, but remember that the Twitter board held him to it. They wanted to get rid of this hot potato as fast as they could. If they thought if they thought they had a great thing and he was going to hurt it, they would have let him go. Because remember, he didn't want to do this. He was forced to do it by the courts, and so or by the Twitter board. So they were desperate to get out of this because they were losing an enormous amount of money, and they probably couldn't last much longer. So he's now doing what they couldn't do, which is cut deeply into the whole thing. I think he'll end up rebuilding the system. I think that already started. I'd love to be the person that got fired on Friday and then asked over the weekend to come back because, man, so expensive. Like I'd be like,
yesterday's price is not today's price.
I could pay off my house with that. With that mistake. So let's.
They performed your salary boost strategy for you. Thank you.
Exactly. Amazing. That'd be amazing. I would absolutely come back at a price
2x.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think a signing bonus that is about the size of my house mortgage would probably suffice. So,
next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Amazon has their Just Walk Out technology that uses machine learning to enable shoppers to shop without a checkout. If the grocers provided APIs and appliances were equipped, could you see similar tech used for auto replenishment in the home?
Alex.
If it works as well as Whole Foods, no. Because Whole Foods is ever since Amazon bought them, they've been out of things constantly. So like the thing you don't know about Whole Foods is whether the thing you're looking for will actually be there, because it's only there about 30 to 50% of the time. So I don't think it's working very well for Amazon.
John?
You see this already with some smart fridges and shelving things. They're using cameras and weight to determine what you're buying and how well it's actually going down, or looking at specifically like scanning in as you're storing things. So those things definitely will come around. How good they are and how much of a barrier of entry is it? That's going to really be, I think, relative to how well we advance the tech.
Courtney.
Well, hotels have been using this for years in the mini fridge. If you just take a candy bar out of it, it knows and charges your account $12. But I find that Amazon, if you order your food from Amazon on a regular basis, like there's a iced tea that I like that I can't get in the grocery stores anymore because they've all consolidated into one single grocery store. And if I order it at a certain frequency, pretty soon Amazon knows that frequency, and it'll tell you, looks like you're getting low on iced tea. Would you like me to order some more for you? So it will ask to order more based on your frequency of ordering it, regular items at a regular pace. So it learns your purchasing, behavior, and then offers it up to you when it thinks you're running out.
And Bill.
No one who's ever raised a toddler will forget that time that you were sitting there in the shopping line and the toddler managed to grab 3 or 4 things off of the really closed shelf, toss them in the cart. So this idea of letting the near field technology just read your cart and charge you for it, I don't think is ever going to completely replace for all of general grocery shopping. There are circumstances where that I think will work for a certain class of customers, but that checkout process, which allows you the last, do I really need that? I really like the look of the ice cream when I was in the aisle, but I think I probably shouldn't. That kind of last minute decision, I think people are going to still want to have agency over.
And Nigel.
Our local arena, the new arena in Austin, has this for some of the concessions, particularly the drinks and some of the food. And you wander through a turnstile, you give them your credit card, you take what you want off the shelf, and you walk out. And I think it's using cameras to watch us, what we're doing. I have to tell you, there's a lot of phased people who, walk out and don't know if they're going to be charged. But let me tell you, it very successfully charges you.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Victor Cajiao in Cape Town, South Africa. He says, testing video pencil with Mimo Live. Using NDI to connect iPad with Mimo Live initially, thought the main camera latency was because of NDI, but created a new document in Mimo Live with the Brio as the main camera and still have the same awful latency. Thoughts?
Alex, real quick.
Yeah, I think that we'd have to define what awful is. So like, try to tell us exactly how many milliseconds that you're talking about. If it's half a second or a second, because there's big chunks that are different there, but it shouldn't be with the Brio going directly in. You should see some latency. There's just processing latency, especially if your video is separate than your audio pipeline. But and that would be the other thing is if you're talking to your Brio, does it stay in sync?
John?
Yeah, typically software switches, you're going to see a 1 to 2 second, second latency. When you're dealing with that, it's same thing you're going to see as a higher level of latency with the audio when you're trying to monitor from the CPU side of the actual processing that's going on. Those aren't dedicated DSPs. And so you're going to see a much higher amount of latency than you would dealing with anything else. Just keep that in mind. When you're not using hardware, dedicated hardware, you're going to sacrifice your latency.
Next question.
Next question, Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How to set up an ATEM for iMag at a live event. Audio sync, latency, external feeds. What are the gotchas?
Alex?
So in general, you do want to use an SDI based with reference. So you need to have one of the switchers that has reference for it. You're going to want to gen lock your cameras and your switcher together because that means that you're going to get that subframe accuracy that's there. And that will make a big difference when it comes to latency. So it really is important that everything is gen locked as you go through this, because otherwise you will not, that'll be the biggest problem that you have, with this is seeing someone and having live iMag with someone on stage is probably the least forgiving thing that you can do with video. So you just want to minimize any kind of processing that's going on if you can. And then also just know that some of it will be off. Some of it's just going to be, it's not always going to be, I've worked on some very large events and I can see it. You're just trying to get within 2 frames if you can. And that means that you just have to minimize the pipeline that goes through it.
Next question.
Aaron Husledge of Durham, North Carolina says, would anybody be interested in joining an office hours Mastodon server?
Alex.
And I talked about this on Twitter this morning. I don't think that Mastodon is going to be the thing. Like, I just don't, and I don't have the energy to like dig into like learning new things in this area if it's not going to be the thing. Like, I don't want to spend a lot of time. Like I did this with G+, where with Google+, where you build up a big following and then it just disappears. I mean, Mastodon. I don't think anyone really thinks that Mastodon is really going to build up into a large network. It's been around for a long time. It's just geeky and weird, and so the thing is that I think that that's going to be the problem with it is it's just too geeky, and we're geeky, so some of us might get into it, but when you look at a larger market social impact, I don't think Mastodon's it because people have enough trouble just getting their server to work.
And what it looks like, it's an open source social media server?
Yeah, people are talking about it a lot right now because people are leaving Twitter because of all the kerfluffle and saying Mastodon is a distributed server system where there's not one central governing body, and they want that for some reason.
It's a rebound relationship. It's not going to turn out.
Twitter, you let yourself go.
And Bill?
That's all I was going to say. I hadn't heard of Mastodon before 2 days ago, but there are enough articles with people in the tech community who are trying to find an alternative just to get away from all the drama. And Mastodon is the thing that is talked about the most for that. And that's what I understood. It's a Twitter-ish, but it's distributed so that there's no person who runs the single central core of it. And I think people are looking for that as some of these social media things become more pricey. They're, it's just harder to deal with. And they've gotten so big that they want to get out of the drama and get to something that just works.
John, real quick.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, like it's essentially just a really poorly run Discord. Like when you think about what you're actually getting out of it, you're not getting much out of it. Every different community you join is another login to manage. Like that's already done very well with Discord. We don't need that again.
Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana says, what is your go-to wire cam? I've been using, and he's got a link there, viralcam.com, since they're kickstarted, but the battery is going and the backup safety cable is not a great setup.
Courtney?
Well, I don't have a go-to. Well, the go-to would be, Garrett Brown's Skycam or Wirecam, which uses multiple points and digitally controlled winches to control the tension on the cables. I looked at this device. It uses basically a little motor-driven transport that runs it along a single wire. The wires, you string the wire between two trees or two anchor points. But the problem is in looking at the footage that comes from it, there's no way to control sag and bounce, because as the unit gets out there and it starts bouncing, it looks like there's a lot of bounce because there's no control over the tension in the line that you're setting, because that's static, and that can droop or sway in the wind, etc. So, and since it's only anchored by 2 points, and not the greatest thing. It can give you some unique shots for a very cheap price because it's just a piece of rope and a little motor-driven sled that runs up and down the rope.
And Alex?
The industry standard now is becoming SpiderCam. So SpiderCam out of Germany is pretty much the highest quality that we've seen so far, but it's not an affordable solution. But there's also Pro-Aim makes a fair number of things out of India that oftentimes are good for the price that are there. And then there's Dactyl. Dactyl, I think it's DACTYLE, I believe. Dactyl is another one that's been around for a long time, and they build affordable cable cams.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, we talk about Twitter cutting their accessibility team, but why do you think many hardware and or software vendors in our industry don't think about accessibility? For example, I don't see Ableton Bitwig having any accessibility support at all.
Go ahead, Alex.
It comes down to just how big, a lot of times when you're doing a lot of things, when you're building a product, you have a limited amount of resources and a limited amount of time, and you are making decisions based on market size. Like if I'm going to put this limited amount of time into something, how big is that market? How likely are someone, So with software companies, it's actually a lot easier. So an Apple or a software manufacturer that is doing an OS, that they have a lot of scale, and that market is something that's important to them. But what many companies do is go, how many people in production are going to, they're not looking at what's good or right. They're looking at how much money is it going to cost? Because oftentimes accessibility is very expensive. Oftentimes it's not an inexpensive thing to do. Captions, for instance, when we add captions to an event, it's like it becomes 80% of the work of the event is getting the captions to work. And so it's a huge lift, and then you aren't sure how many people are using it. And so captions have been a big success in that area. But other areas, and squeaky wheels do make a difference. So telling people that you're looking for it means that that they notice.
Courtney?
Yeah, a lot of hardware vendors solve this problem by just creating a web-based software interface for their hardware, and then built into that software interface is the accessibility of the operating system that it runs on. Unfortunately, a lot of the software interfaces used a fixed resolution interface for a touchscreen because scaling a scalable touchscreen interface is very difficult to deal with as an API, because the touch points move every time you scale it. So that's one issue, and that's why you have to choose amount of magnification that you use or resolution that you use to get it to work for your level of accessibility. That's one solution they offer, and a lot of them depend on that software interface to handle those accessibility issues.
And Harshid.
I think that a quick issue here is R&D costs money, and where the companies are willing to give in for that cost or where they're not willing to give is the main problem that we're having as a market in the States anyway. They rely on agencies to pay for it, and agencies don't mind spending something upwards of $5,000 a piece of equipment, but that piece of equipment only takes, let's say, a fraction of the cost to make. So we kind of have to reconsider the cost of R&D and what does it really mean to a company.
Next question.
The next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. We talk about quitter cutting their accessibility team, but why do you think many hardware and or software vendors in our industry?
Oh, yeah, we just said that. My apologies. We are now at the top of the hour. That just shows that we need to have more conversations around the accessibility in the tech space. But thank you so much, everyone, for all of you producers for submitting the questions for the first hours. Now we're going to make the transition over to us discussing second hours, and specifically for Mondays. It's been a little bit over a year, and if not hitting a year, since really beginning to program the second hours for Mondays. And that is a collection of, we cover topics on leadership, on business, on innovation, like when we've had folks talking about NFTs. And this, we really want to make sure that, much like what we were just talking about with accessibility, that we are really serving our community and bringing on guests and topics that really serve what the second hours can be on Mondays, and definitely looking forward to hearing what you as producers would like to see and hear. We've had some meetings, actually. We've got like a council helping with that. There's Guy and Nigel and Sky and just some folks that will bring some of their both their creative background, but then also their business and entrepreneurial and leadership background. And we've been really thinking about what are some of the topics that would make sense, that would resonate with the community, while also this is a great opportunity because there's a survey that we've got, and we'll look at getting that into the newsletter to hear from the community. But this time is an open conversation, open dialogue to hear from you. Alex?
Yeah, I love the ones where we're talking about business owners that are talking about how their business runs, like what it takes. I think when we looked at the gaming, really understanding, having people on at least once a month, I think that are in an industry or from an industry that might come on and just talk about what the industry is really like and what are the challenges in those industries. I think that helps us get our head around it, because I think a lot of times we're on the outside looking in, we're doing the graphics for them or we're doing something. But I think that in different industries that we may touch, whether it's an event producer talking about what they deal with, or someone in the game industry or someone in the broadcast industry, just having them, and it could be people even that still run a business. It could be people who are retired that don't. In some cases, that's a better situation because they don't have anything to protect anymore. So
right.
So they're leaving that industry, or maybe they're leaving that industry and going into another industry. So now they can give us the skinny on what's actually going on. So I think that would be interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, just even having, like, Todd was, phenomenal. We've had a lot of phenomenal guests on the second hour, but as you said, like, their deep industry knowledge helps us, because it was a couple of weeks ago with the conversation around jobs of the future and recognizing, like, having an understanding of the gaming industry, NFTs, even there's been a lot of talk about AI, and getting a better understanding of those industries and what their needs are, and then how we can support. And because everyone in the OH community is not necessarily tech. We have the education group, we have, marketing folks as well, and so many others that probably just don't have a categorization yet or a grouping. And that's, I kind of see Mondays being a little bit of a catch-all, and this conversation will help to maybe even bring some more definition to that. Jason?
So so I'm clear, are we talking only about the constraint of office hours thematically second hour Mondays, or is this kind of writ large?
It's more so Mondays, like, so as the community, as the group, we're planning out, because some folks it takes a while to get them, like the Sean and Benji took a really long time to just now lock down their schedule. So as we continue to look at the thought leaders in the space that having an idea of who we want to invite on or those topics, then our back end team can really work on courting them and inviting them and all the logistics that it takes for producing. So yes, for Mondays, and we're also defining Mondays because that was kind of an internal conversation. We've been throwing things at the wall to see what sticks, and and just hearing from the community. So hopefully, does that answer?
Yeah, it does. Along those lines, I think I personally have found the most value in the things like online gaming that I knew the least about, right? Like seeing how it connects to the things that I already know in production has been incredibly valuable because it's, we end up with these talented people who can very quickly give us a snapshot. And I personally have found that very valuable. So yes, the stuff that to me is production adjacent is actually more neat.
Nice. Courtney.
Yeah, I think what Alex said, finding retirees can give you a great deal of knowledge, general knowledge about a topic. But with the frequent paradigm shifts that we're running through with technology changing on a daily basis with AI and everything else, I know I get left behind and I have trouble keeping up. So it would be great to bring in some of the younger people that are still working in the industry. But the problem is scheduling and getting them to come in on a morning between, because if they're very good, they're working. So it's hard to schedule. And maybe we could do something like do a pre-interview, do an interview with them, and a host can take time out and at their availability, conduct an interview and maybe play that interview back as an informational point in the second hour, and then the panel can discuss what was said during the interview if the person is not available to field questions. Of course, that is not near as good as having them live on the show itself, but it might be a way to get some of that expertise into the discussion without having to pull them out of a working job.
Agreed. And Jason, was that you coming back with or did that just pop up?
No, it came up because I wanted to be sure that after you answered my question that I had just another quick in.
Copy that. All right. And it looks like, okay. Harshid?
Hey, so what is interesting is what would you guys want to understand about accessibility on, on the front of things? Because for me, accessibility is not necessarily that I want to bring it up every single time. It becomes part of me because of my vision loss. From my perspective, I look at it as, well, if YouTube is soon going to allow audio description, what is that pipeline? How many channels does it take for somebody to sit in a room that's, covered up and soundproofed to read a script? And who's going to write that script? Maybe Sky is going to write that script because he's a great storyteller. For me, I make all of these small connections with all the folks that are here differently because everybody brings some different things to the table. So what would, myself or Laura or anybody else that is vision impaired or, Zach that could also bring his knowledge to the table, how can we bring another set of people to have a conversation? We've already spoke about women should come to the table, and I kept on saying that's a good one, and we had her come twice. So what other things do we feel as a group that could enable more topics? I've mentioned audio description. I've mentioned maybe other tools that could help each other. Just, I can't read the teleprompter. What kind of tools do I need? So how can we help each other?
Yeah, and I just this is just a benefit to having you and Laura here. We, because I've been away in production, our script writer had to do something for writing for an app that had some accessibility components. And I remember in After Hours, you commenting of, for if you're going to lead someone who might be visual impaired, that to put your arm out and lead, and immediately I messaged them and that changed to the script. And it was like the client was like, yes, like, aha. So just all of that feedback. But what other, maybe Harshid, you can even help to answer that. Like, what other areas do you find where there's maybe some neglect in the accessibility space as it relates to production and or events?
Well, one thing that Courtney mentioned, as interface software are made, we might not have the luxury of changing sliders. So for me, when I look at hardware, I like faders and knobs and, to pot the things to different levels. So for me, I like the physical aspect, but there's also that conversation to be had with, let's say, SSL. Hey, what is your software like? Let me test it out for you. I know a wonderful woman in Atlanta, and her dad's parents used to be opera singers at Georgia State. And it's just incredible to learn about audio from him, but he is so incredible that what he does for his daughter to get her accessibility needs for, through high school. And I was able to help him in certain cases. And I think the Melee would be an incredible piece of equipment for her because she also has autism and other things. But besides of that fact, she likes smaller devices, right? And that device sounds like the size of a Nook, maybe. I'm going to go ahead and send that out as a recommendation. So for each other, I think asking questions is always welcomed. Don't feel shy. And then the other thing is maybe I'm asking a question for somebody else. So don't consider that that's my question that I'm asking always, because we are all producers at the end of the day. We have to produce something for someone to have some sort of interest.
And speaking of producers, this is a great opportunity for you to add any questions that you have around our Monday second hours and or any suggestions for what you would like to hear and see, or even some guests that we can invite into this conversation. And let's head into the questions, Bill.
Absolutely. Our first one comes from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia. And he said, could we think of a theme of topics for small creators specifically? I'm a very small creator, embedding it into my academic work, and feel I learned so much from office hours when we talk about solutions for both big and small work.
Yeah, there is a big, even on YouTube, that in the past few years of this now community of like small creators, and the actual definition, I don't know that I have that, but I look at people that are like under 10,000, whether it be 10,000 followers or whatever their community looks like. But that's a great suggestion, Morgan, because that just overall will help, whether that be from the business side of things or the growth aspect of things, gadgets, gear. So including small creators in that conversation, because we've done some things where it is like freelancers comparing, on people who are in corporate or in organizations, and then having the freelancers. So that makes sense too. Now just making sure that we address small creators. So thank you for that, Bill.
Absolutely. I'm standing shoulder to shoulder with that idea. To me, the change in accessibility of equipment and the ability to do video, audio, and other types of production work without having to invest in a corporate structure. I mean, when I was starting out, literally, if you couldn't get through the door of the TV station, you couldn't do production. And look at where we are today. You have a smartphone in your pocket. You can literally do a turnkey video production with nothing but that all the way through, which means that there are tremendous swaths of people out there who are excited about this and they want to understand how to do that. And they're going to be navigating just like I did. I navigated from camcorders up through professional cameras and adding more equipment in the course of the arc of my career. Individuals are going to do that too. And I think individuals are going to now start easier, develop skills, and eventually then need to have some of the skills of being able to expand their operation and learn more about collaborative work, the kinds of things that you used to only be able to learn about in the big shops. So I think it's small creators is the beginning where the people who will be the big time creators all have to begin in this era.
And Courtney?
Yeah, look on YouTube for creators that you really like their presentations of, and see if they have posted any behind the scenes or information on how we do what we do. Marcus Brownlee, who produces some incredibly professional stuff, and he has almost an unlimited budget. But there are a lot of do-it-yourselfers out there, one-man band type YouTube creators that have millions of followers and produce videos every single day or every single week that work with just a shoestring budget, a single camera, and they're edit on their laptop and upload every day. Follow them and see occasionally they will post behind the scenes stuff or instructional things on how they create their YouTube channel. So that's a good source to go to for learning about how to be a creator for on a budget. And a lot of the stuff we present here is, we have Alex's wallet to look at, and a lot of times none of us have Alex's, funds. So, we will present a lot of times the high-end version of that, and you may not have the ability to purchase some of that more expensive equipment. So, look around, because there are do-it-yourself channels that show you how to get good results on the cheap.
And then I think, too, to Morgan's price is us bringing some of those conversations. So you actually just gave me a really good idea, Courtney, with that, is looking at some of the topics that they do address. The DIY Marquise Brownlee is definitely not a small creator at all, but he does speak to those that are looking to grow their skills, but looking at some of those, some of the content that they do put out, and then bringing that, seeing how we can tweak that and make it work for the office hours community. And the other thing I was thinking, I don't recall, and feel free anyone to chime in, that we've spoken too much about finances. And I think sometime earlier this year, there might have been just an overall second hour brainstorm where the concern was the legal parts of things and finances changes, or it's different in each country. But there could be some potential for us to bring some experts in that could maybe speak around the general area from finances, because that's really important for us to be able to get to the Alex Lindsay budgets. Next question.
Next question comes to us from John Snyder in Reno, Nevada. John says, Monday second hour idea, a month-long focus on the business side of a specific industry, for example, gaming. Week 1 would be marketing. Week 2, HR staffing. Week 3, an overview of historical changes. Week 4, future of the industry, stuff like that.
I like that. Alex?
Yeah, I think that I definitely think we should dig into industries related to those things. One thing that we have found didn't work really well earlier on was trying to build themes over time, because if people didn't, if they weren't engaged on the first one, they tended not to come back to the other ones. So right. Having the same thing, they'll go, oh, that's part of that model that I don't want. So that's why we tend to switch it up a little bit. We have themes for the days, but we try to think of it. I do think that we want to think about it. It's easier to manage if we start thinking about themes for the first week, second week, third week, fourth week, that we talk about different kinds of things and we know what that box is going to be. It might be, and I don't know what those boxes are yet for Monday, but I think that might be something that makes it easier, is we're always going to interview somebody about being a creator on the first week of every month. And we're going to do this. Now, sometimes that becomes hard because then you have to find that. But if you say that, like, if I'm going to interview creators the first week of every month in 2023, there's only 12. There's 12 creators that you got to find, and then you go down and you go, okay, now we're going to talk about the business elements on the second Monday of every month. Now there's only 12 subjects you got to figure out. And so you kind of can build some order, and then you have kind of wild cards on the fifth Monday that you have occasionally.
Jason?
I'm going to throw something out that I mentioned over the weekend that is not a fully formed idea by any sense of the matter, but just about every aspect of production has a cloud component to it. And I feel like it's been covered starting from the very bottom of Amazon S3, but has not really been allowed to bloom into a shared vocabulary for the parts that really, how do I put this, that should be their entire, I don't fully understand this, other than I think it would be good to have a second hour where we establish a vocabulary about the cloud so that it can be referred back to and does not need to start from zero.
So basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, that hour would be dedicated to just making sure that language, almost like here's a glossary of terms and here's how we use them and we describe them. Is that kind of along the lines that of what you're saying?
I don't want to have to start from zero every time it's this in the cloud and here's a brand new Amazon instance. I'm not quite sure what form it should take, but it feels important to me because the cloud is not going anywhere and it's going to change everything.
Bill?
I want to support what Jason was saying right then, because we talked about that in our meeting the other day, and it was a long and useful discussion, because everybody can see that the traditional production skills and things like that are migrating into this global thing called the cloud. All sorts of production processes are becoming internationalized and distributed. And I agree that when you've got a fundamental deep technology like cloud access, cloud manipulation, just plumbing yourself into the cloud, and how do you do that, through what services, and how do you pay for it? If we ignore that stuff, I think we're doing a disservice in all the other areas. I'm not saying you have to focus on it entirely for over and over again and constantly relate things back to the cloud. But Jason's point about, if you don't understand the very basics of that, are you going to have trouble finding your footing as all these jobs migrate more toward that? It seems pretty important to me.
And I just want to go back to John, or some of the elements that John picked in his question here, of like the marketing aspects, the HR and staffing, and again, putting this out to the producers and those watching, the future of the industry, but also what other verticals should we be looking at, or could we be looking at, which may come out when we push out the survey to the community, to, because from a marketing, whenever we go into a project, we're always looking at who the audience is and what, like the makeup, the demographics of the audience, to understand what kind of content needs to be put out, or however this event is. And I think that's something that is helpful as well, to, okay, so those that tune in on Mondays, and yes, watch the replay, but what other verticals do we need to touch on? We might not be touching on all of them yet. And that's why we're having this conversation. Bill?
I just wanted to expand on what I'm saying. I'm not saying specifically that we have to keep studying AWS or how to put video in the cloud, but think about all the things that Office Hours does now that have a cloud component of it, whether it's Discord or whether it's the other tools we use, scheduling and things like that. In all of those cases, those of us who want to be involved in the production of this need to expand out and maybe plumb in some things they weren't thinking of. I didn't use Gmail very much, but now I'm using it more and more, because some part of coordinating the work in the group that I'm a part of requires me to understand that. And I think there's bunches of stuff like that that are going to be fundamentally changing, and that we need to keep aware of all of them if we're going to serve our audience well.
Jason?
Well, and getting back to kind of the essence of the question, I love the idea of taking a specific vertical and explaining it all the way to the top, but thematically, I can understand how that can be problematic. Getting back to just kind of the rote fundamentals, for what it's worth, I'm probably not the only one with a business degree, and being able to explain the benefits of a single subscriber LLC, and generally in most states how easy it is to incorporate. I don't know if we really want to get into that, but it is a pretty important aspect, of covering your liability, getting insurance, getting a corporate bank account, that kind of thing. It could be covered pretty quickly and pretty generically. I guess maybe, what does the lawyer's son think about that?
Right. That is, even if it's under an umbrella, to your point of even just like getting started with business, and just some of the fundamental things that could probably work across like globally, that could be very valuable. And usually those are topics at the top of the year anyhow. So that helps with programming. Alex?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times it comes down to, I think we can find ways to talk about those discussions of basic ball handling skills, like just how do you keep yourself out of trouble? How do you get things basically set up? Not how do you find tricky ways to do it, but how do you just find really basic running plays that just has your business not become complicated. And I think that, discussions around that are good, and they work everywhere, to make that work.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next. And Douglas this time says, our own Victor Cajiao did a second hour on composing a song with GarageBand, and he's got a link to it there. Should we do another second hour on music composition, which explores not only software, but compositional techniques?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think it's time for our office hours band to get back together again, and this time rather than doing a remake of their own take on an existing song, to compose something from scratch. And I think we have enough talented people here who have some composition skills to document their composition of the song before it's handed over to the rest of the band to generate their parts and chime in on it. I think that would be great.
And to answer your question, Douglas, yes, it looks like we'll probably have to reach out to Victor, or even if there's someone else in the community that we can have that conversation. And Bill, you did a breakdown of editing the video? Was that an after hours, or was that okay?
Yeah, we did that. So we have old pieces on the archives about how the band kind of formed and put together. And it's a fascinating process. There are people like Brian who were compositionally really strong, who were able to adapt songs. Going through the process of the Office Hours Band was one of the most educational and enjoyable things I think I've done in the last 5 years. And it was just a delight. I hope we can get more of the people back in here to do that, but I would be all for it. And I think it'd be a fascinating exploration.
Next question.
Let's see. John Snyder's up next from Reno, Nevada. Second hour topic idea, understanding metrics, particularly YouTube, web stats, and so forth.
Go ahead, Jason.
I love this because it's constantly evolving. And to me, it has two parts. It's understanding what the numbers are, and then the fact that statistical inference is really more like jazz than anything else. And anyone who's ever seen Google Analytics should have a pretty good sense of just how complex it can get. But again, I come back to a shared vocabulary of here's what these numbers are actually, what they are. Here's, this meter in your car does this. And then what you can infer from that is an entirely separate subject.
Agreed. Yeah, just the overall analytics conversation, because that's usually the hardest part. Like, you've done all this work, whether it be with your content or the project, but then that recap and the impact and the ROI, like, we throw those words out, but to really understand how you get to a certain state and how to make those adjustments could be extremely valuable. Next question.
Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Given the office hours focus on media and virtual events and Monday's business focus, where might we look to find entrepreneurial stories and second hour guests where somebody successfully created a live stream or media outlet from a skill or hobby that they love?
Oh, we've had Greg Gibson, share his story. But then to your point, Josh, of, finding others, I've seen, just even being connected to various office hour members on LinkedIn, that the people that they're connected to in this space, being able to, there's a woman out in California who has a big virtual events production company. I was like, oh, we need to tap her. So I think it comes from us, one, having this conversation today, and that letting the community know we're definitely welcome your thoughts and any suggestions, and putting that in the second hour for Discord. So I think that's a great place to start. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Up next, what about a second hour on successful streamers and their business models on their specific platform? Twitch, YouTube, Patreon, all be obvious three, although maybe floatplane would be good too. The business and sponsorships can vary greatly.
Yes, they can. And I think even too, bringing on, because I don't recall, I've been here for like 2+ years, anyone from Twitch coming on, but even looking into some of the successful folks using that platform. And they've made a bunch of changes in the past month or so. So that would be a good idea, a great second hour. And I know that, Josh, you're taking notes in the background. Alex?
Yeah, I think that understanding their business model will be really interesting, to the level that they're willing to talk about it. Of where do they actually make money? Is it in advertising? Is it in product sales? Is it in, because they all have different ones. One of the things when you start working with YouTubers, for instance, some of them are mostly just selling products. It's their own products that they make that go along with their videos. Some are making money on advertising. Some are, making money by getting sponsorships from, large corporations. And so, understanding what those all are and what works in different areas it would be really interesting.
Bill?
Yeah, the topic of the business of streaming, I'm still confused as to why I keep hearing all these stories. Bob put up a video and got 3 million views and didn't make a penny off of it. Or the other side of that, this person just diligently worked and built that upward revenue stream over the course of 5 years by doing these things. I think a lot of people would be interested in those things.
Go ahead, Jason.
Well, and there are as many ways to monetize this as there are ideas to monetize. I mean, really, it truly is sticking things to the wall. Adam Savage is a wonderful human and a great speaker and an incredibly talented model maker. And, instead of trying to succeed purely on Patreon, he sells merit badges for ways you can be injured in your shop. Like, this is the I just hit my thumb with a hammer merit badge. Like, I thought, what a great idea. So it truly, the sky's the limit.
And I think Alex said it really well, as like also how much they would be willing to share. And most of these creators too are also probably creating or working and navigating those schedules. So that's why we're having this conversation, so that we can try to invite them on sooner than later as they plan out their 2023 as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. We talked about the business of eSports, but what about the production techniques behind eSports?
Courtney?
Well, the production techniques are moving into mainstream, as you find ESPN starting to cover esports and some of the other sports channels covering it. The production techniques are just along the line of any arena sports venue. As we've come out of COVID and gone back to real live sports events, they're putting on these esports competitions like a football game or a basketball game. And so the same techniques used to cover that. It's a little more static because all the players are sitting at computer consoles, and they tend not to be too many dynamic personalities involved. They have to add a lot of flash and glitz and production value to them to make it seem a little more exciting than the in-person venue actually pretends. But they're using all the big boy toys to produce these things these days.
And that's a great comment, Douglas, because I think even getting to do the work to get Todd on the show, it actually came out of, it was sometime in the summer in Discord, there was some going back and forth of just even the production side of esports. I think Jonas has done a couple of productions, Jeff Keatley has done some. So also making sure that I could get like scheduling time with those folks to come on, because they can definitely share a lot on that side of things, of like the actual production and some of the things that you think through, because not all esports productions are created equally. There's some on the smaller scale, some on the larger scale. So yeah, thanks for that, Douglas. Next question.
Next one comes from John Wallace in Pontiac, Michigan. Second hour topic, managing technical people.
Ooh, Bill.
I would absolutely vote up managing technical people. I would also add in managing creative people. I maybe it's my years in radio when there was this gulf between the sales team and the on-air team. And I remember, when I made kind of a little bit of the switch, became the production director at a radio station rather than just being an on-air talent, I got a new appreciation for how hard it is to sell an intangible like radio time. And some of the things that they had asked me to, I'm coming in late Friday and here's 10 more spots that have to be done. And I got a little huffy about, hey, come on, you're messing up my weekend to do your job. But as I understood what their job was, I backed off being a little so hostile about it. So I think all the different areas of managing human beings, how do you get to a creative person who might be more sensitive to some topics than the business person? And how do you also make the creative people understand that without the business people, you're not going to make a buck off of all this creative work you're doing? Right. They all have their place. And I think that's a huge, important topic to speak on.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think it would be a good topic because a lot of times people don't take into account the fact that they hire a lot of technical people that are experts in each of their individual fields, but they may not have overlapping expertise. So if one person who's a key person on the crew gets sick or has a personality conflict with the producer or something and storms off the set, what are you going to do? Handling a topic of handling situations like that where you have make sure you're hiring technical people that have overlapping fields of interest that could jump in and take over that particular crew position if needed in an emergency. That would be, a great topic for second hour.
Next question.
Next question from Paul Wallace, Cedar Creek, Texas. What are the guidelines for using a clip from YouTube of the office hours panel answer to some of my questions?
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think that you can use anything you want from here. Don't worry about it. Just cut it out. Yeah. Just you need to cut something out and put it somewhere. I mean, we prefer you not to take the whole thing and publish it, into another YouTube channel or something like that. But if you have like a clip that you're trying to use somewhere, especially in a presentation or something, you should feel free to use it.
Next question.
That's better than Creative Commons.
Yeah, it's like I used to do Creative Commons. Now I'm just like, come on, like whatever. Yeah, exactly. So.
All right. Chad Lafarge from Columbia, Missouri is up next. Controller options. I'd love to hear what other people are using, how they optimize their workflows for them, and what makes specific tools special. Are you talking about like gaming controllers or things like that, or what kind of controllers?
Jason?
I think he's talking about, the various MIDI interfaces of the world that, use USB and can make things easier, starting at Stream Deck. There was one, what are the name of the modular ones that you could snap together? They were supremely cool and very expensive. I bought them. I know Alex bought them. They were a couple years ago. They were very cool. Do you remember the name, Alex?
I don't.
Yeah, they were neat, but gone. So there are a lot of ways to do this.
Chad says that, that's exactly what he was referring to. Just jumping onto Chad's question, just like workflows, I always find workflows fascinating. So maybe even there could be something around that. I don't know if it's per industry, like how to move information through people, or if there's like a more overarching topic. But that's always like, so how do we get from A to Z? Jason?
Yeah, another thought would be just, take a single easy to acquire component like a Korg Nano, right? How far can we go with a Korg Nano? How far can we push it? And I think there are three, but there's one major one used in production. The ones with the faders. No, they're not motorized, but they're cheap and they are infinitely graphable. You can plug one directly into an ATEM, for example, and it'll do MIDI connections. But again, not for high end productions because it gets a little wonky. Lots of things to explore here.
And then pulling in a comment from Dr. Chris Clark, says cultivating teamwork, planned redundancy of skills, and a feeling of community as possible topics for second hours. Next question.
Nice. Josh Kaufman, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, up next. Courtney had an interesting suggestion of second hours based on interviews or an interview or interviews. What homework, pre-watch content would the community be interested in to underpin a second hour discussion? Interviews, YouTube videos, media events to emulate or avoid, perhaps?
Alex?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I'd love to do for second hours is when we post second hours is to have a whole, here's your reading materials if you want to do that. Like if you want to get the most out of second hours, here are a couple of YouTube videos to look. We're going to talk about this subject. This would go for any day of the week. We're going to talk about this subject. We're going to have here are a couple YouTube videos and maybe even the in and out points or the in point for those, so you don't have to watch the whole thing. Here are some other maybe web pages that you might want to look at or PDFs. And I think having that kind of material for everybody. What's interesting about sending materials out to folks for a Q&A is that if only a small percentage of the people actually read it, it informs the questions and the entire conversation goes up. So when everybody's flat, there's one conversation. When you send out it doesn't mean that everybody has to read it. Everybody has to do the homework. But if 10 or 15 or 20% of our viewers do the homework, the questions become at a different level, especially on something that's more new to us.
Jason?
And before anyone gets worried, by reading material, we don't actually mean you're going to have to read a web page. It will be completely, and it'll be accessible. Yeah, it'll be audio.
Courtney?
Yeah, and I know it's more work for Alex, but if he could put links, if we're going to talk about a certain topic on a certain day, if there's anything that would increase your knowledge on that topic or expose you to something, put those links in the email as they go out so that we can know coming up ahead of time.
That's exactly what I think we would be great to do, is to have a bunch of stuff that's all connected to it. I mean, in a perfect world, you'd have a team that built like little videos and things and pages, and this is what's coming up, and someday, when we're bigger. But and it won't be more work for me because I can't do it right now. So it'll be more work for Josh and the councils that are working on the different verticals. But as we brainstorm, as we think about this is a subject we want to talk about, it really doesn't take that much time per unit to go out and spend 10 minutes on each subject and just go, I'm going to look for a bunch of links that I think will make sense, especially if a couple people do it and come together and just say, this is what we're going to do.
And how would we measure like the effectiveness of in doing that? Is there something more tangible than just the quality of the questions or the conversation?
I don't think that, if we had all the videos in our own space, then we would know how many people watch them. But I think that I think we would probably see just a higher quality conversation, higher quality questions. We already get great questions. Every person that comes here that sits down is like, wow, I can't believe there were so many good questions. And so we're already doing really well, but I think this would take it to another level if we had a little bit of, and we should think about it like this shouldn't take someone more than X amount of time to look at. So, this isn't hours of, it could be like, here's a hit list of a couple things. If you really want to dig into this, here's another one. So there's like 10 minutes of stuff that you might do. And then here's the 2-hour version. So there's some people that are really interested in this. And if we give them, these are things that we can talk about, they'll dig into it and they'll get a lot more out of it. A lot of times we only have these experts once, we don't bring them back over and over again. So we want to make sure that everybody has the best foot forward to ask and get the most out of every hour.
Sounds good. And Bill?
As someone who does the reading a lot, I try to do the best job I can at promoting what's coming later. And I know there's other sources for doing that. Does it make any sense to have, when we talk at the end of the show in the wrap up, some graphic that can come up with QR codes or something like that for the other days following and say, here's something for Thursday or here's something for Friday to look at before the show? Does that make sense?
In general, our experience is if we put it out in the email, that'll be what, we can definitely build QR codes for that, but the email is going to have links to, as it goes out every day, and Josh has made a huge push and a huge improvement of the email in general. I think a lot of us noticed that it's nicely laid out. First, we had to get it out of the Zoom auto email, and then Josh went to work on it. And I think that even my older daughter was like, "Whoa! I got the new email. It looks way better." so I got a lot of updates there. So, and it's going to keep on getting better. One of the things we want to do eventually is customize it when we have a bigger team. And if you're interested in that, let Josh know. But lay it out so that you have, today is this, and this is what we're doing. Tomorrow is this, and it's a little bit more graphical of this is what's there, and kind of the day is a big thing, and then the next days are maybe a little bit less. But they all give you that information every day, so that you have somewhere to some people complain about. There's always a certain number of people that complain about getting something every day. I have to admit that my thing is I just want to make sure it comes out at the same time, because it means that any given day I can just go down to a specific time and find what are we talking about today. So I get a lot of email, and so I never quite understand I don't want to get an email every day, because I sift through hundreds and hundreds of emails very fast. So I don't quite get that, but we don't want to do more than that. But I think that having something every day that tells you where it is makes a difference.
And Courtney.
Yeah, if we're gonna come up with the idea of actually pre-interviewing people who schedule does not accommodate them being on the show live, what would be great is to promo that, schedule that interview, assign a person to interview that person at whatever time who can do it at whatever time that person is available, and promo it ahead of time so that we can access, to post on Discord, go into Discord and post your questions there for the interviewer, so that he can ask questions related to many of our producers here that they want to ask that certain person. so that even though we're going to be playing that canned interview as part of a second hour and then carrying on with additional questions, that the questions that the interviewer is asking are those posed by the panelists and producers of office hours. So promote it maybe a week in advance, saying, next week we're going to have so-and-so. We're going to be interviewing so-and-so on this such and such a date. Get your questions in now and put a link to Discord where you can enter questions for that specific interview.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia. When you think of the office hours community, how would you break down the percent by industry or profession?
Alex.
It is all over the place. I don't know if there is I have, we have put out some polls, and we don't get enough people to be statistically accurate. So that have filled out those polls. We might do it again somewhere in the future. We did it early on. We could probably do it again just to get a sense of it. But yeah, it is. I mean, the variety of people in the viewership, I'm always amazed by. I don't know if there's a specific industry that is heavier than others. There is a specific a lot of people who watch MacBreak are here, and their friends. So that definitely was a common thing. That's probably, I think it's dropped a little bit, but for a while it was like 80%, and now it's probably in the high 50s of some crossover there. But I think that it's been kind of amazing to see, how, and I think that's really important. I think the heterogeneous mix of the audience is part of what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, and that's why I was like, maybe somebody else, because we have a lot of technical folks. I do find there are some faces or some names that I regularly see on Mondays, and the John Snyders, the Morgans, who are in organizations, which is why I tend sometimes that those conversations, like, okay, we got to make sure, apart from the entrepreneurial part of things, making sure that we're speaking to people who are in an organization, who are not necessarily a part of a production crew. So I was just curious as to anyone else's thoughts of, we've got programmers, we've got software folks. There are event planners as well. So I was just curious if anyone else had some snapshots. So yes, we'll look forward to getting another survey out just to see how helpful that could be. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael up next. What do you training and or onboarding pipelines and how to build them? And he notes CILM's Jedi Academy.
So Douglas, I'm interested in, this is a great question or suggestion. So are you saying like just the best ways to train people, or are you saying actually using tools for training them? Alex, you might have some more insights there.
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to do it once you're in a company as well. I mean, I was actually part of ILM training, I didn't do it. I was in it. I was being taught how to build creatures in Softimage, which was what I did in my training there. But I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how companies approach this, training as we move forward, because it's really, really important to start even before people are working for you. It is one of the things that, Google Grow with Google. I think it would be really interesting to bring some of the managers on that are talking about that. Swift Playgrounds, some of the Cisco and AWS training, what they're looking at is, how do they seed the entire industry? And also they know that it takes years to figure this out, and they don't want to pay you for those years. so they'd rather give you training so that you can figure it all out. And then you prove that you learned the stuff that they wanted you to learn, and then they can hire you, And so I think that's going to be, I think that a discussion about training the industry for future acquisition is something that a lot of companies don't do very well. I know that, when I invested so heavily in Pixel Core, we definitely had a lot of people that we had trained, and I still hire them. I hired one of them last week I actually worked, one was training me, someone from Pixel Core was training me in something, and another one was doing work for me. And these are people that I've known, that I've gone to, 15 years, so it was a really interesting puzzle, but that investment has paid off over and over and over again.
And in the comments, John Snyder says Disney U is a great example of corporate training program as well. And Douglas did say, yes, both the tools to use for training, but then also the actual workflow of how to best train people. So thank you for that, Douglas. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael. What do you think of a second hour on the human relations issues related to our industry? Particularly, it's resolving conflicts within teams, choosing people for effective teams, and how to de-escalate situations, that sort of thing.
Jason?
So I've done production for the state of New Mexico, continuing education on mediators, and any mediation class is just, it's a fascinating deep dive into the role of a mediator, which isn't actually to solve the problem. It's kind of to continue to put the problem in front of the people who are having it, and just kind of continue to churn it until it gets resolved. Something along those lines might be interesting. It may also lose our audience. I don't know.
Bill?
Well, there's such a ton of money around the world being spent on generating conflicts and tribalism that I think anything that can talk to people about combating those forces from all sides and all directions. I mean, it's one of the things that drives people to get upset enough to open their wallet, and people have figured that out. So anything that can deconflict those forces, I think is useful to look at for all sides, for all circumstances. There's just a lot of stress out there in the world right now. And so having skills that can help an individual or a group handle those, good thing.
This almost feels like it falls into, we had someone on talking about mental health. So it could be one of
Absolutely.
those more like, okay, so the relational part or the personal part of the work that we do. So conflict resolution and relationship building, and okay, see where that's going. Courtney.
I think we may have already done this in the second hour, but a good second hour is working with celebrities. In the entertainment industry, it's rife with minefields, and it's a whole different topic than working with just individuals. A celebrity a lot of times will have handlers that you have to go through, publicists or managers, etc. And you have to be careful not to offend anyone, especially if they have large egos. As a result of their celebrity. So you have to be fairly careful about that. That might be a good second hour, how to make sure your crew doesn't step into a minefield of, celebrity eggshells that you want to tiptoe over.
And that really goes well too with the that was just a great show with all the feedback on jobs of the future and just the celebrity aspect of, okay, how bringing PAs or bringing people on site, and especially if they're coming out of school, how they need to conduct themselves, and maybe there's some kind of etiquette going along that stream of thought there. Courtney, next question.
Next question comes to us from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Starting a business is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. Unpleasant but necessary duties and ever-present jeopardy awareness. What less glamorous topics on needs versus wants, and how much weight to give these topics?
Jason?
So here's an easy one. One spreadsheet comparing a rental of an equipment over the course of 5 jobs, with annual depreciation on its standard single member LLCs, taxes, versus calling it an equipment charge and financing it yourself, versus renting it. I don't know, something like that. Less glamorous, but it can make all the difference.
Very true. And I keep coming back to just even the financial, whether it be bookkeeping 101 or some of those fundamental, because if your cash flow isn't in order, that will impact. We all want to get to the fun, creative stuff, but without generating revenue, then you won't be doing the fun stuff for very long. So that being the unpopular but necessary part of the business. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many places here, and there's so many intricacies of how you manage your finances and business that I think are really, we had to do what's called factoring your invoices, because at one point with PixelCore, because we were growing so fast, we were ahead, we were doubling every month for a little while. And so you couldn't, your AR and AP didn't add up, didn't line up. And so understanding what that meant and how to deal with it, and how to not get into that situation. We only had to do it. Most people, when they factor stuff, only have to do it for a couple months. It's on a pinch. But what does that mean? And how does that look to the vendor that you're working, or the client, and, all those things I think would be really interesting.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael back again with second hour topic, managing professionals on the autism spectrum and bringing more of them into our industry.
I think that is definitely a great topic, and definitely a need that we can, just even with Harshid sharing that, I'm like, okay, so we can add some more accessibility even to the Monday conversation. Tony?
Yeah, this is something that if you're interested in doing it, you have to be intentional about it. And by that, I mean, that is, you really want to do it. And there are a lot of different ways that you can do it. And the thing about dealing with people on the spectrum is that there is no one mold that you can fit people in, because everyone that's on the spectrum is unique. Their needs, their abilities is extremely varied. But there are some people who will, the main issue that you have to deal with when you're talking about a professional that is on the spectrum is that typically the issue is not their abilities to do work. It is their ability to be able to be social and interact with team members. That is the barrier that is most often the problem. And so that's the area that you have to focus on. It's not the actual work that can be done, because there are so many brilliant people that are on the spectrum. The issue, the deficit, is social. It's the interaction with others and team members.
Thank you for that, Tony. And thank you to all of our producers. We've wrapped another second hour on the topic of second hour. So thank you for your feedback. And if you are watching the replay, feel free, and if you're part of the community, to go into Discord and add your ideas about what we should discuss for the second hours on Mondays. And to our panelists, thank you so much for your insights, your feedback, your suggestions, and of course, the back-end crew, for which we would not be able to, our global back-end crew, we would not be able to come to you the way that we do across Zoom and YouTube. And I do want to share, we've got an exciting week. We have Zoomtopia coverage is taking place tomorrow, so that we'll have a keynote watch party taking place in after hours. And tomorrow's show is Inside the Show with Felipe Nardi, and he'll be talking about creating outstanding Zoom virtual audience experiences without a team and without being tech savvy. So if you want to learn more about what we do here and the schedule for the rest of the week, head over to officehours.global, and we will see you all next time. Bye.
A second hour on second hours is so meta.
It is, isn't it?
Wait until we start doing second hours on third hours and fourth hours. It's like first breakfast and second breakfast.
I don't think they know about second breakfast.
I don't think they do either.
Speaking of meta, lots of layoffs today.
Thank you, Dr. Clark, for your feedback.
Always.
See everyone in after hours.
These people do a lot more than the people you see. Watch these names.
Yes.